Hey there, friends and followers. This week's video compares living inside the city limits versus outside and some great pros and cons for both. Stay tuned. So yes, as always, welcome back. So as with any area that you plan to move to, weighing out the differences of living directly in the city versus the outskirts is usually something that tends to come up in that conversation. Regarding Ocala specifically, I'll share with you guys a couple of pointers from each perspective to better help you with any decision if moving to Marion County is something that you're planning. One of the beautiful things about the Marion County area is that while Ocala is a great place to live for various different reasons, the surrounding or neighboring towns or cities are great options as well. Places like Anthony Reddick, Silver Springs, Bellevue, Summerfield, and Denellen. Starting first and foremost with living in the city. Now, probably one of the top advantages of living in the city of Ocala is the convenience you have to everything here. Between entertainment, events, eateries, and shopping, Ocala is going to provide it all, not to mention any miscellaneous items that you're going to need as well. Now, even as the city has expanded in recent years, it is still relatively small, meaning that you can still get from one side of the city to the other in about 25 minutes or so, of course, depending on the traffic. Between hospitals, entertainment spaces, shopping, and dining, all these become super accessible, especially if you're located in an area with a residence close by. Now, with that being said, one opposite or con is going to be your cost of living associated inside the city limits. Typically, we do see things here being a little bit more expensive versus outside the city limits between overall housing, utilities, and tax amounts. Now, as you start looking at venturing outside of the city limits, one of the immediate pros is going to be that you're going to be able to afford more house for your money. To put it in perspective here, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at about 1,500 square foot, sitting on between a quarter acre and a half acre, and of course taking into consideration any upgrades or finishes, is going to run you less outside the city limits rather than inside. You're also going to notice that there will be a difference in the cost of utility outside the city limits versus inside. Water typically isn't metered and measured the same, and cost of electric is generally offered at a cheaper rate in those surrounding outside areas. Now, a huge advantage that buyers can also utilize if they're willing to live a little farther out and make that commute into the city, if need be, is the mortgage financing that is allowed. The most popular being the Farmhouse Administration or USDA loan. This loan type specializes in providing lending for homes outside of the city limits and offers a 100% down payment assistance, a huge incentive for, say, the first-time buyer. The great thing about the Marion County area is that there are 3 or 4 large residential pockets where this loan type can be utilized that, while still outside the city limits, are still close enough to thoroughfares that make getting into the city a breeze. Some examples being parts of Ocala Park Estates, Silver Springs, the Silver Spring Shores, Marion Oaks, and Denellen. Now, as for some cons to living outside the city limits in these areas, it brings us right back to the immediate conveniences available. These areas generally have fewer options for one thing or another, and you may have to make a small drive for something specific if needed. Another thing to consider when living farther out is, of course, the internet that's going to be available to you. In some areas in particular, the service is going to be fair at best, and satellite options may be your only choice in these certain areas. Researching this item before deciding on an exact location may be best practice. Now, another item that you're going to want to keep in mind when outside the city limits is the water and waste removal systems that are in place. Most anything new and newer in the city these days is hooked right up to the city water and sewer, but homes farther out or on more land typically are going to utilize a well and septic system. That in itself can have some extra perks and downsides to it as well. Whereas you will save in some utility costs by using minimal energy output to power the well and eliminating the need for a water bill, there is some routine maintenance that these systems are going to need, especially the septic tank. As best practice, a routine clean out every 3 to 5 years. Whereas a drain field which hooks right up to the septic system can have a lifespan of about 15 to 20 years if maintained properly. If not, and a replacement is needed, you could be looking at spending up to $5,000, $10,000, or even $15,000 in repairs, depending on the soil type or the topography of the land at that particular home site. Another item that could come up as a con or a negative to living outside the city is, of course, taking into consideration your overall commute time to places. Depending on how far out you're considering moving, the overall time to hospitals or the time it would take for random services to get to you is something that you're going to want to plan ahead for as well. Keep in mind that some more rural areas here utilize dirt roads or unmaintained roads that could also play a factor in the bigger scheme of things for you as well. Well, there you have it, friends. Those are a few pros and cons for living inside the city versus living outside. As always, hopefully you guys were able to take a tidbit or two away from this video, and I certainly encourage any questions or comments that you guys may have on the matter. As always, be sure to slide on over to the page, give it a like and subscribe to stay up to date when videos like this are released about Ocala and all the areas in between. As always, thanks for tuning in, checking out the videos, and we'll catch you guys on the next.